Fallout Equestria, Project Horizons, by Somber, original by K-Cat. Chapter 1, Inception. Once upon a time, in the magical land of Equestria. War. War never changes. It had consumed our home, a war fought by foreign aggressors, until a great and terrible magix had been unleashed to burn all the world to ash and dust. Only our constant devotion to the princesses had carried us through that terrible war, just as our unwavering faith in the Overmare maintained our continued survival within the earth. Trust in the Overmare. Obey the Overmare. That grating buzz of my alarm yanked me away from sleep. I stuck my left foreleg out from under the blankets, away from my head, felt around for the end table next to the bed, found it, and proceeded to whack my pickbuck against the tabletop until the right button was hit and the noise stopped. I groaned and smacked my lips, tasting the sour gunk in my mouth before rolling onto my back and huffing softly. Good morning, Blackjack. Welcome to another thrilling day in Stable 99. I half crawled, half rolled, half fell out of the bed and gave myself a vigorous shake. Life in Stable 99 was routine, with any deviation from punishable by the security mares. I had half an hour to wash, half an hour to eat, and an hour to report to my duty station. The same as it had been every day since I had gotten my cutie mark. Slowly, I shifted through the copious junk I'd accumulated. It was mostly recycled food chips and old drink bulbs, though I liked to pretend that some of the open bottles in the dresser were some sort of fermentation experiment. Maybe a pet? Colonization by our future fungal overlords? America dream. My horn glowed white as my magic lifted my uniform from one of the heaps, gave it a test sniff. Ew. Unacceptable. I tossed it back on its pile, and sifted around for another. Yeah, this'd work. Trotting down to the showers, I passed the murals designed to inspire camaraderie and cooperation, at least according to what I'd been constantly taught in classes. We are all the Overmare's foals, declared the caption on one picture of an abstract white unicorn hugging dozens of tiny ponies in her hooves. Another showed one lone weeping mare under the caption, Selfishness separates. I trotted into the sector's communal bathroom and immediately my ears perked to a familiar giggling. Walking past a stall, I glanced in at two mares employing unauthorized and probably ineffective washing techniques. According to the training manual, behavior like that in public spaces was punishable by whipping and a restriction to Class C rations. So it was pretty understandable that the pair looked up with some trepidation when they spotted me. Oh, it's just Blackjack, the dappled mare, Pastels, said in relief before flushing and snapping at her partner. I swear you're trying to get us flogged. Fun, giggled the white mare, Misty Hooves from the bakery, nuzzling her. Misty was a chronic repeat offender. I didn't know if she liked the kiss of the whip, or if there was something else wrong with her. Or both. I sighed. In theory, I was supposed to discourage this thing. However, it fucking sucked being the mayor who was supposed to discourage this kind of thing. You won't think so if it's Daisy doing the flogging, I commented, and instantly their smiles disappeared. Couldn't blame them. With the constant duty and honor bullshit, a little flank spank was one of the few reliable means of recreation, and a lot of the security mares got really enthusiastic about it. I stepped under the spray and immediately jerked. Cold! Yeah, heating talismans are really slow today, Misty said. Well, I said after a moment, go back to your quarters and finish up your fun. Make sure you're back in your beds by curfew. That's me, big badass security pony. The pair glanced nervously at each other, then quickly finished their showers. I wonder if we can do it in this atrium and not get caught, I heard Misty mutter to Pastels as the two trotted out. I rolled my eyes and shook my head. Some mares have all the luck. Not that they were the only two, or even the worst two. Half the ponies in the stable seemed to have at least one flavor of crazy. I supposed it was only inevitable when half your day was devoted to keeping this place going. And we had to keep it going. If we didn't, don't think about it. Stable 99 was all that was left. Every filly learned that as soon as they could read. The mega spells unleashed across Equestria had sterilized the surface. Radioactive death was all that awaited us outside. So we kept the stable working. We kept order. We kept loyalty. Because at any moment... Fuck! Blackjack! Don't think about another instant, I muttered softly. The Overmare protects. But I felt a gloomy specter rising inside me at the thought of the entire stable being in the hooves of a filly a year younger than me. There were exactly 500 jobs to be filled in Stable 99. 400 and something were covered by mares like myself who inherited our jobs from our mothers. My mom was security. I was security. When I had my daughter, she would be security. And so on and so on. In the rare event of a mare dying before she could breed, a lottery would be held for some other mare to produce an extra filly for the spot, because the population had to stay at 500. Every pony had to behave and follow the rules. Otherwise, there'd be an incident. Stable 99 couldn't take another incident. This bathroom alone showed the flickering lights from overtaxed generators and the water that couldn't settle on whether it wanted to be freezing or boiling. You couldn't think about it. All it would take was one thing to go wrong, and we'd all die. One busted generator. One broken recycler. One accident. And we'd all be choking on our own unrecycled breath. Fuck! Don't think about it, I said, trying to shove it from my mind. That was made ridiculously easy by Midnight trotting past me towards the atrium. Instantly, my ruby eyes popped wide at her cute flank and graceful tail. Black on black, and oh ho ho, she needed to be mine. Hey, Midnight! Midnight! Hey! Hey, wait up! I shouted as I tripped and raced to catch up with her. Of course she didn't wait. She never did. Instead, she picked up her pace. Damn it, Midnight! No running in the halls, I shouted as I ran after her. What? I was security. I was allowed to break the rules when pursuing a fine flank. Unfortunately, there was a flash and a pair of hoofcuffs materialized around my forehooves. Oh, shit! I barely got out before rolling head over hoof. I glared around at the source. It could only be Daisy Marmalade. Excellent cunt block. Top notch. The pale earth pony Mare and the honey-colored unicorn both smiled at my predicament. No running in the halls, Blackjack, Daisy said, stepping out of the side hall she'd been lurking in. When Stable Tech made the stable, clearly they hadn't had mares in her size in mind. Her ears nearly brushed against the ceiling as she looked down at me with her snide little grin. Not even after Pussy. Marmalade gave an echoing little snicker. Right, you got me, I said as I held up the hoofcuffs. So? Aw, don't know the spell yourself? I thought all security unicorns did. Marmalade does, Daisy taunted as she stepped over me, making her way towards the atrium stairs. The vapid unicorn gave a slack grin and nodded, and then both of them had a good laugh as they trotted away. I rose, glaring at their backs before hobbling after the pair. All security unicorns were supposed to know a selection of spells for policing the stable. Me, I had telekinesis. And telekinesis. And, oh, did I mention? Telekinesis. I couldn't cuff or stun or do interrogation spells to save my life. All the practice I'd put in merely gave me a migraine. I'd have been better off being in maintenance... Wait, that would mean I'd have to be responsible for the stable. Strike that. Better I were in food prep. Nice, low responsibility food prep. That was the life for me. But I was security. Because Mom was security. Because her mom had been security. All the way back to the legendary card trick. The one who'd carved security, we save ponies, above the entrance to the security level. Hooray for completely irrational expectations. I knew I'd never save 99. Couldn't even get out of these hoofcuffs. Whoa. Pity party. Table for one. Or not. I didn't have any time for the poor me routine. Never played well. Nope. I just had to get out of these cuffs, and I had an idea how. The huge atrium was at the heart and soul of pony life in 99. Almost half the stable could fit in the room for large events. More if every pony was really friendly. Huge support pillars had been sculpted in a parody of tree trunks, and the support beams had been fashioned to resemble branches. That was about the extent of trying to make 99 look like something outside. Besides, the effect was ruined by the huge banners of the Overmare smiling down at us all, and her stupid patriotic slogans of "Help the Overmare," "Help 99," and "Stability overall." I mean, really, stability? The music piped in was half parade march and half hymn. Any wonder why I tried to stay out of this place? There was also the fact that most ponies refused to look at me. They'd drop their conversations, look aside, or leave. Didn't matter what I tried to be nice, the fact was that all I had to do was drop a name and they'd be hauled in for interrogations. I'd witnessed enough to know that I didn't want to drop a name. Besides, I'd already tried it once. Never worked for the ponies who deserved it. I passed the cafeteria where ponies loaded bowls with green recycled algae slime, scooped recycled fungus cubes onto trays, collected synthetic recycled carrot sticks and apple flakes into bowls, or heaped up stacks of green recycled grass chips, brown recycled hay chips, and white recycled cake chips upon their plates. All the food in 99 was recycled into more food. All the waste in 99 was recycled. We were recycled. And yes, even after having lived here my entire life, I still found it easier to pretend that the machines just magically made the food poof into being. Still, despite being made out of recycled poo water, the chips were pretty tasty. You just had to not think about it. Midnight was talking with Rivets and Textbook, and the black unicorn's eyes widened at the sight of me hobbling to her table. "Mind if I join you? No? Great," I said as I set my hooves on the table before she could shoot me down. "Hey, Riv. Hey, Teach." The Earth Pony schoolmistress sniffed disdainfully at my intrusion. "We were having a private conversation," Textbook said sullenly as she glared at me. Rivets and older gray Earth ponies showed far more amusement at my predicament. Great! Do I have a story to tell? Here I was, just minding my own business, hurrying to catch up with a particularly lovely mare, when these hoof cuffs appeared on me like magic. Can you believe it? I asked as a grin as I tapped them on the table. So there I was, pondering and bemoaning my fate, when I remembered a certain vision of angelic equanimity, whose magic far outshines my own, and whose kindness and generosity would surely compel her to free me from my predicament, I said, grinning ear to ear as I fluttered my eyes at midnight. "Blackjack, I'm a pickbuck technician," she began, "which means you're intelligent, skilled, that you possess far more competence than a lowly security pony like myself," I said as she hesitated. I almost had her convinced. "I'll pay you in oral sex," I blurted. Textbook turned the shade of a spoiled apple, and Rivets covered half her face as she chuckled. "I'll talk to you tomorrow, Midnight said to Rivets as she trotted to another table. "I'll be telling your mother about this," Textbook added to me before going to join Midnight. I groaned and pressed my face into my bound hooves. Rivets patted my shoulder. "Oral sex, huh? What's the going rate on that?" "I'm an idiot," I muttered. Rivets chuckled, certainly not arguing. "I had no idea. I didn't think you were into mares," Rivets said with a smile, munching on her grass chips. I shrugged. "It's more the fact that she always tells me no." I glared down at the cuffs on my hooves, growled, and then bit the conjured metal. "She always finds hard to get," I said around the mouthful of metal. "Well, it's your time to waste. Her spot on the queue's up, though, so I really doubt she'll have time for you," she said matter-of-factly. "Really?" My red eyes widened and then drooped along with the rest of my body. I slumped till my chin rested on the tabletop. Bummer. "We all have our little trials," Rivet said with a sigh. "I've got to go get Duct Tape's filly on the duty roster. She's taken over for her mom," she sighed. "Hopefully she knows which end of the wrench goes on the nut." "Duct Tape died? How?" I gasped. She was one of the nicer ponies in maintenance. I frequently bumped flanks with her on C shift, though never actually talked with her. Of course, after all, I was security, and she was scared to death of me. Rivet snorted in irritation. "Don't you ever pay attention? She died a week ago. Tried servicing the Overmare's terminal, it blew up in her face. Power junction wasn't closed. But Scotch tape doesn't even have her cutie mark yet, right? She's still in school, I pointed out, twisting my hooves errantly with the cuffs trying to feed them. Does that matter? I've got 150 maintenance mares to manage, and I've got a hole in the C shift, and she's got to fill it, Rivet said firmly, narrowing her eyes as she pressed her lips together. I feel for the kid, really, but the stable takes first, last, and middle priority. She'll just have to get over it. Really? I thought it was Overmare first, last, and middle, I replied, enjoying a little smack talk. Normally it would get a grin. The look on Rivet's face now, though, I'd never seen her look so angry in my life. My black and red striped mane itched terribly, and I just wished my hooves were free so I could scratch it. Rivets groaned. Don't talk about the Overmare to me. She's been throwing all kinds of special work orders and studies my way. Little foal's demanding peak efficiency, and she's countermanding my work assignments to make damn sure it doesn't happen. She reached into one of the many pockets on her utility barding and drew out a notepad. Last month, she ordered the stable recreation broadcaster and maintenance one overhauled. Then she collected every piece of scrap electronics and conductor for inventory, and then kept the entire terminal crew occupied with searching and cleaning the stable databases. Maintenance one was the little closet of utility space next to the stable mainframes, and the massive stable tech hatchway right outside the atrium. Sometimes I used it for naps when I knew the Overmare was out. Did she say why? Do Overmares ever? Rivets countered with a snort. Her mother was bad enough. I sure didn't shed any tears when she died last year. But that little tyrant is going to... And she drew herself up short, realizing that even though I was the most irresponsible mare in security, I was in security. She coughed and gave a little shrug. I'm just concerned about the stable, that's all. And that was the story of my life. No matter how friendly I was security. She wasn't. I enforced the Overmare's rules and punished those who didn't. I sighed, my ears drooping a little. Well, see you at the card game tonight? There was some considerable doubt in her eyes as she stared at me. She rose with a cool, of course, you're always welcome at the game. Not because I was actually welcome, but more because having me there would assuage the fears that the game would be raided. After all, I was the only pony in security who liked associating with the maintenance mares after hours. It's in Atmospheric Maintenance 3 this time. Bring your bits. Because I would be leaving with exactly as much as I came with. Because I was tolerated, not wanted. Goddesses, why was my mane crawling thinking about the look she had just given me? I looked at the cuffs on my hooves, feeling as if there was something I was missing, then growled as I narrowed my eyes and bit them again. There were 500 ponies in Stable 99, and 1/10 of them were reassigned to the duty of protecting and safeguarding the stable and executing the will of the Overmare. Unfortunately, we also had to frequently tackle the question of which one took priority. The briefing room was fastened with graphic reminders that service to the Overmare is service to the stable. I hobbled in just as the security head started the evening briefing. The security head was Jin Rummy, a middle-aged unicorn who still looked better than several of the younger mares. Her purple and red-striped mane contrasted well with her lavender coat and bright pink eyes. And those pink eyes looked right at me, with immediate disapproval the second I hobbled in. Jin Rummy trotted up to the podium and flipped through the notes organized on her pitbuck. The microcomputer on the leg of every pony in the stable had a ridiculous amount of data storage space on it, but I wagered hers was nearly full. She'd been head of security for longer than I'd been alive, and I'd never known her not to be organized, confident, and secure in her knowledge of what was going on in Stable 99. Daisy and Marmalade snickered as I limped in, and I gave the rest of the security mares a sheepish grin and shrug before taking my seat. Jin Rummy just sighed and looked at me with a slow, disappointing shake of her head. Still, wasn't much she could do. So, every pony, I want to thank you for your hard work. Stable incident reports are down to under 5% this month. There hasn't been anything more severe than a few Class C incidents of violating curfew. Springs was caught this morning hoarding Med-X, but she surrendered her stash willingly. Punishment will be 20 lashes in the atrium tomorrow morning. Ooh, pick me, can I do it? Daisy asked with a grin, waving her hoof in the air. Jin Rummy did not share her humor. Punishment will be administered by a random pony from A shift, Daisy. You know that, she replied firmly. Daisy snorted, glaring at me. I responded with my best what expression. In other news, medical reports that we're missing a male. There's a new P21 to round up for retirement, but he hasn't reported back after his last breeding assignment. C-Shift, your job is to sweep the stable. If a mare's sheltering him, write up the incident and escort him to detention. If not, find him, Jinrunmi said firmly. Daisy rubbed her hooves together gleefully. Most mares simply looked bored. I tried my best not to squirm. Damn it, why were the hoof cuffs so hard to get out of? Every pony in stable 99 had a job assigned to them from birth. Maintenance ponies maintained. Security ponies secured. And baker ponies baked. The 40 or so males in stable 99 were no different. They were breeding equipment. From birth, they had their segregated quarters and medical and were signed out by mares for reproductive purposes and, more frequently, recreational. There were 20 unicorns and 20 earth ponies on the breeding rotation. Once a male reached, how old was it? 12? 15? They were put into breeding. Of course, to keep the number in rotation the same, that meant that a male had to be taken out of breeding and retired. So, if there's nothing else, Jinrumi's eyes scanned the assembled security ponies before landing on me. Very well. Oh, and tomorrow I'd like any ponies confused about how to dispel a hoofcuff spell to please report to security at 1200 hours for remediation. Maybe I could do more than telekinesis after all. I was in the front row, and yet, magically, I still knew that every eye was on me. Amazing. Alright, A-Shift and B-Shift off duty. C-Shift, stable is yours. Daisy nodded in response, and with that, the mares dispersed to get their last shot at dinner before curfew went active. Yeah. Thanks, I really appreciate that, I said as I looked at the head of security mare sourly. She returned to look coolly. You're not a blank flank anymore, Blackjack. You have duties and obligations to the stable. If you can't fulfill them, then it's my obligation to train you to meet them. Yeah, except no pony ever asked me if I wanted them. She started for the exit. Hey, I called after her, and when she looked back, I sat down and raised my hoof cuffs. You mind, Mom? She sighed as she looked at me for a long moment and then finally went from being head security mare to being my mother. Trotting back, she lowered her horn to the cuffs, and with a flash she dispelled the summons restraints. Technically, every security unicorn was supposed to be able to do that. Technically, every unicorn, much less every security unicorn, was supposed to be able to do a whole slew of spells that I couldn't. Maybe Mom would get lucky and outlive me. One thing was sure, the second I became head of security, Stable 99 was doomed. Marmalade's work? She asked in a tone that always seemed to prelude her fighting my battles for me. It was really tempting, I admit. Of course, this was why even most of the security ponies gave me a lot of space. No pony wanted to offend the boss's daughter. Don't worry about it, Mom, I can handle it, I said, trying to put on my big girl look. Okay, I was definitely old enough to have it by default, but she always looked at me like I was her little blank flank. When there was no pony around to see, of course. Thank the goddesses. I trotted out after every pony else, pretending not to hear her sigh. Yeah, that just about summed up my feelings on the subject as well. Outside, I glanced down the hallway. The uppermost levels held security, the armory, the Overmare's office, and all the mainframes that ran the stable. Down at the end of the hall were the Overmare's office and the maintenance room with the mainframes. The Overmare was talking very agitatedly with Midnight and a few of the other mares responsible for the information systems. The dirty white unicorn filly who was our supreme leader looked mad. There was nothing new about that, but tonight she seemed like she was in a grade A pissed-off mood, and was determined to share it. I'd never seen Midnight look so upset. Get out! Get out! Get out! Get out! Get out! Leave before I have you all shot! You're useless! The Overmare concluded in nigh hysterical shrieks. It was at moments like this that I was glad the laws didn't allow summary execution. Really glad. Midnight! I shouted as the Overmare returned to her office. She looked back at me, ears drooping as she rubbed her eyes furiously. I don't have time for your flank spank right now, Blackjack. The Overmare's pissed. Yeah, I got that around have you shot, I said as I fell beside her as we trotted back downstairs towards the atrium. Why? Midnight looked at me, then sighed and shook her head. She wants a data file. An old one. And you couldn't find it? I said with a frown. Unlike me, Midnight was actually competent. No, that's just it. It was already found by duct tape weeks ago. The thing was buried deep in the stable's archives, but she found it. Goddesses know how. Midnight said as we stepped into a large chamber. The stable chimed out that the curfew was about to begin and all mares not on sea shift would report to their quarters. So what's the problem? It's encrypted, she said with a sigh. We can't get it open up for transfer. She wants us to break the encryption, but we haven't been able to all week. She chewed on her lip. I thought that if we got it ready for transfer into a pit bug, she'd be, well, less pissed. But she was hysterical. I've never had the Overmare say I should be shot. Clearly, Midnight was shaken. I could relate. There was bitchy Overmare, and then there was what I just witnessed. Mom wouldn't let her, I said, as if for the first time in about forever received a small smile in return. Look, don't worry about it. You'll get it eventually. Thanks, Blackjack, she said with an obvious relief. Okay, this was my chance, I grinned. So, I've got 10 minutes before I have to start my rounds. Can I swing by your quarters on my way for that flank spank? I gave her the best, I promise you'll enjoy it look. She snorted, looked at me, and gave a flat, in your dreams, no. Then she trotted away from me as I sat down hard, watching her go. Oh, come on, I was being sympathetic. Nice. Midnight. But she didn't look back as she disappeared down towards the residential quarters, with the rest of the mares. What does a mare have to do to get a little service in this place? I sighed, head hanging. So unfair. Stable 99 was arranged with one level atop another. At the apex were the Overmare's office, security, the armory, and the mainframes. Underneath that were the atrium, cafeteria, stable entry, and the 24 or so recreation, education, and medical facilities. Underneath that were the residential quarters for the stable's population. And underneath it all lay the utility and maintenance levels, a section larger than all the rest of the stable combined. The recycling systems were all found, as were the magical generators that kept everything going. Manufacturing equipment, storeroom after locked storeroom, and, of course, all the hidden little fun spots, the makeshift stills, the love nests, and the nooks for gambling. Most security ponies stayed at the top of the stable. The tunnels below were dark, undecorated, and filled with the stench of all kinds of foul-leaking fluids and chemicals used to keep the stable habitable. The Overmare might have had complete authority over the top half of the stable, but this was Rivet's domain. She and her maintenance mares were always the most rebellious and independent element of the stable. One day... No, don't think about it. If there was an incident between the Overmare and maintenance... Well, I knew which side had all the guns, and which side knew how to keep the stable alive. Hit me, I shouted over the hum of machinery as I looked at the warm playing cards. They were so old that I'd bet Rivets could tell them by their wear patterns. Good thing this wasn't poker. Rivets dealt me a 4 of spades. I really had no idea how Earth ponies managed cards. They just did. Me, I levitated them around as I looked at the other players. Tonight, I was even less welcome than usual. The other 4 ponies kept muttering to each other, telling jokes and stories that left me out. And my winnings were virtually frozen. No pony mentioned the Overmare. Clearly, they were watching themselves around the security mare. Because one word of sedition, or talk about getting at the armory, and we'd have an incident. Please don't say something that would cause an incident. So, Blackjack, I notice you keep getting shit from Daisy and the others, Rivet said amiably as she smoked on her cigar. She'd offered me the cigar at the start of the game, a blatant blasphemy violation that I'd never, ever report her on. I had no idea how she manufactured them, but it was just another indication that things were painfully tense in the stable. After one puff, I'd coughed so badly that she'd taken it back. They've been doing that for, 3 years now? Oh, longer than that, I said with a small smile. Ever since my first big fuck-up. But what can you do? Well, that is the question, isn't it? Rivets asked with a spread of her forehooves before dealing out the cards. We can't do anything. Daisy is security. You get your job and it's yours, no matter how you abuse your position. She chuckled, friendly-like. But I knew enough laughs to tell it was an act. Don't get me wrong. Your mom's a fine mare. She's always tried to do right by the stable. She just won't do more. Oh, Rivets, please don't go there. Well, it's the way of things, isn't it? Is it? Rivets asked in return with a look that made my mane crawl. You think it's right that ponies like Daisy and Marmalade get to give you that ration of shit day in and day out? Well, no, but what does it matter what I think? It's the way things are, I swallowed, noticing that no pony else seemed to be interrupting. But does it have to be? Rivets asked. There was one answer she wanted to hear, and a whole slew of wrong answers. I shrank back. Why did she have to be asking me stuff like this? Couldn't we just play the game? I needed to change the subject. Fast. So, what is the Overmare up to? I asked as I glanced at the others. They looked at one another, then at Rivets. She was still smoking her cigar with a slow, steady puffs. I snorted. Look, I know every pony's a little more on edge than usual, but this is Blackjack asking. Come on, Rivets, I got my cutie mark here. In fact, I got my queen and ace of spades playing this very game. You can talk to me! Rivets chewed slowly on the end as her eyes measured me up. Finally, she gave me a minimal shrug. You tell me. Overmare has us running crazy for a month, updating her on the stable. Seizes inventory and duct tape dies doing work for her. Now she's screaming at midnight that she's going to shoot her and has her own little guard of security ponies following her around tonight. She what? I blinked, having left with midnight so quickly that I hadn't heard anything about that. Rivets nodded slowly. She's got all of us really concerned. Really concerned. Some of us wonder if we're all safe with her in charge. She's the Overmare. It's her job to keep us all safe, I replied, almost by rote as my red eyes looked from one to the next. Only Rivets met my gaze. Some ponies don't think she has a clue what her job is. Heck, some ponies don't think she even knows herself. And some ponies have to wonder why Blackjack's so insistent on coming to this game. Maybe to keep tabs on all of us? Rivets asked as she nodded to the equipment around us. After all, with all the interference, I doubt you can track us by our pit-bucks. The four-leg-mounted mini-computers were marvels of arcane technology. Even if I didn't understand the first thing about how they worked, I had to admit they were useful. One of the functions most used by security was the ability to, if you had the correct address tag, track any other pit-buck. All I had to do was put in their name, and I could find their location almost anywhere in the stable. Down here, though, it was another story. Probably why the missing male had gone down here. Look, I just want to have some fun, I protested. Was it really that hard to believe? I looked from one to the next. These were all mares I'd known my entire life. Heck, Rivets was virtually my godmother from all the time I spent down here. But from the looks I got, yes it was. I slowly slipped back from the table, leaving my bits behind. I'm going to go, do security stuff. Got a stallion to round up and, stuff. I finished lamely. All of them watched me back slowly out of Atmospheric Maintenance 3. Not one took their eyes off me. Several minutes later, I took a breather. Rivets was just pissed. She'd always bumped heads with any pony in authority, always sure no pony knew as well as she did how to run the stable. As soon as the Overmare calmed down, everything would settle down, and we'd be able to get back to normal. Don't think about it. It was how every pony in the stable survived. I'd just forget about it, and in a week, Rivets and I would be back to laughing as usual. Please let everything be alright. Well, with the game a complete fiasco, Midnight continuing her cold shoulder, and me with 6 hours left on my shift, I might as well actually do some security work. Mostly the 10 or so of us on C shift patrolled and wrote up any mare violating curfew. Down here, I might find more interesting violations, but it was rare that I'd ever run into anything major. I snapped on another function of the pit-buck, the eyes forward sparkle. Instantly, a number of yellow bars filled my vision as the arcane device detected a number of ponies within a few hundred feet. It also had a few red bars, likely a few hungry radroaches looking to take a bite out of. The EFS was a function few ponies used regularly. After all, it only gave direction and hostility, and the indicator didn't even tell you how far above or below you the bar was. For all I knew, that yellow bar was around the corner or a floor up. I entered in the P21's pit-buck address, but the little icon twitched around spasmodically. Likely he was down here. Somewhere. It wasn't often that we had a buck who tried to hide from retirement. Most just reported to security or medical to get their shot, and that was that. Occasionally, there would be a crying or screaming fit in the atrium. Rarely, they'd suicide. Please don't let me find him hanging or poisoned down here. The plain fact was that this was a stable. The only exit had been sealed 4 generations ago during the last incident. And eventually, he'd starve to death. It wasn't like bucks knew how to get into food stores and the like. They just bred. That's all they knew. All they needed to know. Right? I trotted past a row of gurgling pieces of equipment barely lit by a wan yellow spark lamps. Knowing my luck, the yellow bar ahead of me was actually 1 or 2 floors above me. If I was lucky, I could get through this shift without any more disasters, and, if I was really lucky, talk to Mom and not head of the security Mare about the rising tension. The former might be able to do something. The latter would have to crack down on rivets. Or worse, tell the Overmare. Then I heard a faint sniff and soft sobs over the hum of the equipment. Looked like I'd found my pony. Okay, come on out and let's get you up to security. Quick shot and it'll all be over. The sniffling stopped. And then a tiny olive filly with teal eyes peeked out at me. My jaw dropped as I saw the pain and fear in her eyes. You're not... I sat hard and rubbed my head. Could this night get any worse? You're not supposed to be down here. It's dangerous and after curfew. Where's your mama? She just stared at me, and her eyes dropped down to her hooves. Recycled, was all she blubbered. She touched her pip buck and her ID flashed. Scotch tape, maintenance shift C. I tried to think up some creative profanity, but... I got nothing. What was I supposed to do? If this was Duct Tape's kid, then she was supposed to be here. Should I say something about her mom? Give her a hug? Tell her she's doing a good job? Tell her not to be a cry-filly? Sorry about your mom. Don't worry, I'm sure you'll get the hang of it. I grinned at her as she clenched her eyes closed, pulled a wrench from her bar, and nodded before trotting back between the massive round machines. I trotted away as quickly as I could. Wonderful, Blackjack. You'll get the hang of it? What is wrong with me? I berated myself as I glanced back over my shoulder. I really wasn't good at this whole life and death thing. Really, you just didn't think about death in 99. It wasn't really like death so much as one day you're there, and the next day you're replaced by your kid. And someday, they'll be replaced by theirs. I was glad that Mom would probably last forever. I didn't know how I'd handle the stable with her gone. I couldn't help but reach out and touch the steel walls of the stable. Some pony had daubed "Fuck the Overmare" on the gray metal and flanking white paint. A shout of rebellion from the incident almost a century ago. The last time the stable had torn itself apart. Back then, it had been bucks challenging the Overmare and the rules imposed by stable tech when the stable had been established. Today, it was rivets against the Overmare. Why'd I have to get stuck in the middle of this shit? And just as I was getting a nice batch of self-pity whipped up, I stepped right into a puddle of leaking sewage. My hooves slipped in the slippery mung and I went over, getting a faceful of the cold sludge. Coughing and retching, I kicked away, wiping my face furiously. My red and black striped mane and tail were smeared with grunge as I leaned against the wall, coughing and spitting. How nice that the goddesses were making my metaphoric life literal. I tried to think about what I knew about the newest P-21. He was... green? No. Brown? I paid more attention to the unicorn breeding population than the Earth ponies. I'd heard that this P-21 was already notorious for disappearing, though, so it wasn't much of a surprise that he'd pulled another vanishing act. No pony was sure how he managed to get out of medical. Males weren't supposed to be smart enough for that. Wait, what was that? It was another yellow bar, but one that, when I moved my head, changed direction far faster than any of the others. That meant it was a lot closer. As in right on the far side of a door marked Emergency Storage Number 3. I frowned, tried the handle with my horn, and was astonished to find it unlocked. Not even rivets left these unsecured. Slowly, I levitated out my baton, opened the door, and flipped on the lights. Row after row of medical boxes lay on dusty shelves for the day another incident occurred. Of course, there weren't any weapons or ammo, but clearly some of these boxes had been opened. I toggled the lamp on my pip-buck, flooding the far depths of the chamber with light. There in the corner hid a blue earth pony mare in ugly gray utility barding. I immediately relaxed as she watched me with worried blue eyes. Sweet Celestia, what are you doing in here? I thought rivets kept this place locked up tight. She just looked at me with wary eyes. Just getting some stuff for rivets. Her soft voice was surprisingly deep for such a puny pony. I'll just get it to her, she said, slipping her saddlebags and starting slowly towards the exit. But as she drew close to me, I frowned. I knew all the mares on C shift, and the only blue earth pony mare was a medical mare. What shift are you on? I asked with a little frown. C shift, of course. She swallowed as she turned, facing me and backing away. Right, I said as I frowned at her, slipping into full security mode. I might not have found the missing mail, but hopefully this would redeem me a little in Mom's eyes. Still, why any pony would want to steal century-old supplies was beyond me. Identification, please. She gave it by turning to bolt for the door. Now, I might not be very good at magic, but I definitely knew how to swing a baton and tackle a fleeing thief. She made it half a dozen steps out to the door before my glowing stick swept her legs right out from under her. As she went down, I jumped on her back and was amazed when she went completely still. Okay, identification! She didn't move. Didn't respond in the slightest. She just lay there, shaking and crying silently. I frowned as I reached over to use my security override. P-21 breeder. Retire from service immediately. Flashed on the screen of his pip-buck. You're the new P-21, I muttered, staring down at the saddlebags and clothing, keeping him pinned with my hooves. I stripped him of his stolen goods. Sure enough, there were parts that didn't belong on any mare. What the hay is going on here? He didn't move. He simply lay there with his eyes closed, curled up, saddlebags full of food, a utility mare's outfit. Had he planned on trying to actually live down here? Like all bucks, his cutie mark was a white male symbol with dots underneath it. He had 2 rows of 10 white dots. Below that would go 1 more dot. Though I was never sure why, since after that we'd be heading straight for retirement. Well, time for the next bit. According to the Overmare and Stable-Tech bylaws, you are to be escorted to security for final processing and chemical retirement. You are obligated by stable laws to accompany me, or you will be compelled. Do you understand? Goddesses. I hated playing the security mare part. He knew the rules. I knew he knew. He knew I knew he knew. Why did I have to pretend? Meanwhile, he just lay there like a blue doll, his eyes wide and glassy. Just kill me. It's what you do, isn't it? P-21 muttered. I blinked down at him in confusion. It's not my place to kill you. I'm not an executioner. You're going to be, retired. I tried to grin and put him at ease, because bucks sometimes did stupid things. Wouldn't be the first time one attacks me without provocation. He looked back, and his eyes slowly drew into focus. I'd never seen a male look at me like that before. The cold anger inside made me wonder if I was really going to do something crazy. Like you retired him, he replied softly, his storm blue eyes darkening as he stared at me. I think you're confused. Medical takes care of the actual retirement process, I said as I backed away. You're all murderers, he muttered as he rose to his hooves and looked back at the stolen clothes and supplies. I was so close, too. With that, he started to walk slowly towards the stable's central staircase. Close to what? I asked. But he didn't answer. Couldn't blame him. If I were about to be retired, I doubted that I'd be in a chatty mood. Still, it was hard to take him calling me a murderer. I had never killed any pony. I followed him closely, baton ready in case he came back at me. We trotted past an open doorway to a storeroom. The olive filly peeked out with sad eyes as we walked by. I wished that was all that had happened. Just as we reached the stairs to the higher levels of the stable, a baton wielded by a pale yellow mare whirled out from the side hall and struck his rear knee with a sickening, tearing pop that just signaled a damaged joint. He fell to his side, screaming in pain as Daisy and Marmalade stepped out. The huge, pale mare spat out her baton, caught it at the strap on the end of her hoof, and twirled it around. About time we found this missing penis. She slammed her hoof into his face as he tried to curl up into a tight ball. And he's with you, Daisy added with a grim grin. Bonus. Daisy! Marmalade! What the fuck are you doing? I asked as Marmalade's floating baton thumped hard against his ribs and Daisy smashed him with her hooves again. Saving Medical some work. This little fuck's had us down here for hours, she said as she grinned to Marmalade. So I figured we'd take care of him ourselves. What the fuck? You can't fucking do that. Medical retires ponies, not security. Was I actually quoting stable bylaws now? The worst security pony in the stable? What the hell was happening here? Oh, he's fighting us, Daisy said as she circled him and brought a rear hoof down on his swelling knee. Resisting security. A real dangerous case, right, Marmalade? The honey-colored mare nodded with a dumb grin. And just like that, they set themselves to beating him to death before my eyes. I wondered if this was some kind of nightmare that I'd wake up from. But as he cried out in pain, I clenched and closed my eyes. Just wait a few minutes and it'd be over. Just do nothing, Blackjack. Don't think about it. Don't think about it. Don't think about the thumps, and the cries, and the sobs, and the begging. No. Security saves ponies. I looked at the pair beating him in glee and charged Marmalade first. Last thing I needed was another pair of hoof cuffs on me. Her orange eyes widened in shock as the baton cracked loudly against her skull with such force that she tumbled over. Goddesses, I hope I hadn't killed her. Daisy's shock transformed into rage much faster. What the fuck do you think you're doing? He's a fucking worthless male. He's disposable. She charged, and while normally I'd back away from her kicks, this time I charged to meet her. Our chests slammed together, and it was all I could do to keep from being crushed under her. Sweet Celestia, how much did she eat to be this strong? As we struggled, though, I still had one advantage she didn't. My horn flashed white as I wielded the baton with my magical grip. And one more thing I could do with telekinesis? With another thought, I triggered my Pitbuck Stable Tech Assisted Targeting System. The SATS was a magical spell that momentarily slowed time almost to a stop, and let me line up my attacks perfectly. Each attack cost some spell charge that had to build back up over time, but right now, I wasn't going to waste any of it. 3 baton strikes to the head. The spell even gave me the probability of each strike landing. Triggering the spell, time sped up but still seemed to move at a crawl as my baton rose and fell soundly upon her head. The first split of the skin above her eye, the second busted her nose, and the third missed. Still, when the spell faded and time fully resumed, she staggered back in shock. I stood over the fallen stallion, swinging the baton with all the force I could as she retreated for once. Then Marmalade rose, looking at me with a hurt, betrayed expression. Suddenly, this looked bad. Then our pitbucks crackled, the built-in radio squawking, "All C-Shift security ponies are to report immediately back to security. Repeat, all C-Shift security personnel are to report immediately back to security." Daisy stared into my eyes as we both panted, my baton trembling in the air before me as I stared at her, heart racing. This wasn't training, with Mom watching and other mares keeping an eye on me. If they came at me, it would be to kill the male beside me. Even if he was slated for retirement, he didn't have to die like that. No pony should have to die like that. Period. Forget it. You can handle this little cock. I'll report you're bringing him in, Daisy said sourly as she touched her bleeding nose and glared at me. One day, I'm going to have your fucking head on a stick, Blackjack. Promise you that. I swallowed, doing all I could to keep my magical focus on my baton. Maybe, but not today. The metal rod wavered in the air, my heart thundering in my chest. Despite the fear in my gut, the baton remained upright. To be continued tomorrow. I am sorry I couldn't finish recording this in time, but it will be done by tomorrow before I go to work. And, yeah, want to thank you all very much. And I hope you enjoyed the first part of Chapter 1.